Here is a comprehensive, scholar-oriented list of all known ancient evidence that includes the story of the woman caught in adultery. John 7, verse 53 to 8:11. Manuscripts and early versions, and patristic evidence that attest to its existence in ancient Christian textual tradition. I have included all known attestations beginning as early as the evidence allows that contain or explicitly reference this story, not the evidence against it. I also include location variants and versional attestations of the passage being prayer in early sources. Greek manuscript evidence, witnesses including the Pericope Adulterae. These are Greek manuscript witnesses where the text of John 7:53 to 8:11 appears in the manuscript tradition. Codex Bezae, D05, Latin Greek diglot, contains John 7:53 to 8:11 in its normal Johannine location between John 7:52 and 8:12. Significance: the earliest surviving Greek manuscript containing the Pericope. Number 2. Majority of Byzantine Greek manuscripts. A large number of later Greek minuscules include the passage in the usual Johannine place, often designated by manuscript number, e.g., K, E, M families according to textual tradition. Secondary groups place it in variant locations, after John 7:36, after John 21:25, and some after Luke 21:38 or 24:53. Lectionary manuscripts. To 185, Lectionary 185, contains the Pericope Adulterae, John 8:3-11, as a liturgical reading. 125, Lectionary 125, another Greek Gospel lectionary, dated to the 14th C, containing John 8:3-11. Note, I am listing Greek lectionaries here because they preserve the text of the Pericope in worship use. Even though they are late, they are still manuscript evidence that it was read and transmitted as part of gospel tradition. Number 2. Latin manuscript evidence, versions that include the story. 1. Old Latin Gospel manuscripts. Several Old Latin Vetus Latina witnesses contain John 7:53 to 8:11, showing the passage in early Western textual tradition. Codex Usurianus Primus, R. 6th, 7th C, Old Latin Gospel book containing the Pericope. Other Old Latin codices, e.g., Codex B, Codex E, Codex Aureus, Codex Palatinus, Codex Corbiensis, Codex Sarzanensis, are reported by textual tradition to include the passage in Latin form, often supporting multiple textual streams in which the Pericope was present. Latin Vulgate, Jerome, c. 383 to 405, includes John 7:53 to 8:11 in his Latin Vulgate Gospel of John. Jerome explicitly states that in many Greek and Latin manuscripts, the story was found in its Johannine location. Now 3. Other ancient versions, non-Greek, non-Latin, containing the Pericope. While many early versions, Syriac, Coptic, initially omit the passage, there are versional traditions that attest to it being present in some ancient translations. 1. Syriac Palestinian version, Syriac Harklian Peshitta variant hand, British Library Add, 14470, Syriac New Testament manuscript, 5th to 6th C, contains the Pericope Adulterae, albeit added by a later hand and sometimes placed differently, e.g. before Matthew in this witness. Shushu Ethiopic Gaze version. While not attested in the very earliest Ethiopic witnesses, later Ethiopic manuscripts overwhelmingly preserve the Pericope in gospel tradition according to versional studies. 3. Presence in Armenian Georgian traditions. Some Armenian manuscripts include the Pericope. There are textual stream reports of PA being present in Armenian witness traditions as well, though exact manuscript identifiers vary. 4. Early patristic and ancient literary evidence containing or referring to the story. Jerome, c. 347 to 400 AD. Explicit witness. In Against the Pelagians, 2.17, Jerome reports that the story, in the Gospel according to John, in many Greek and Latin manuscripts, was found in its place between John 7:52 and 8:12. He also includes it in his Latin Vulgate. 2. Augustine of Hippo, 354 to 430 AD. Augustine quotes and discusses the passage in his writings, clearly assuming it was in the Gospel text he knew. He famously comments that some manuscripts omitted it for moral reasons, implying its presence in others. While I do not currently have a direct primary citation text here, this is the standard scholarly consensus noted in scholarship and supported by historians of the text. 3. Didascalia Apostolorum, c. 3rd C, and Apostolic Constitutions, c. 4th C. These early church order texts contain narrative material closely parallel to John 8 to 11 about Jesus and a sinful woman, and many scholars understand this to reflect the same tradition that produced the Pericope as it circulated in early Christian literature. Some ancient textual researchers argue this is an independent early attestation to the material that would later appear as John 7:53 8 to 11. Note, the relationship of the Didascalia Apostolic Constitution's text to canonical John is debated. They do not quote John 7:53 8:11 as part of their gospel text, but they preserve the story content in an early Christian literary context. V. Placement variants. Manuscripts where the story appears in other locations. Though not in the main Johannine place in later Greek manuscripts, these attest to the same textual tradition of the story's transmission. After John 7:36 in some Vatican British Library minuscules. After John 21:25 in several Byzantine minuscules, e.g. minuscule 1. After Luke 21:38 or 24:53 in the so-called Farrar family manuscripts, family 13. These variant placements show that in textual tradition, the Pericope circulated widely enough that scribes inserted it in multiple different gospel locations, a form of attestation to the story's early existence in manuscript culture. V. Summary of ancient evidence, including John 7:53 to 8:11. Type of evidence, witnesses examples, approx date, Greek manuscripts with text, Codex Bezae D, Byzantine minuscules 4th 13th C. Lectionary manuscripts, Tot 185, Tot 125, 11th to 14th C. Latin manuscripts, Codex Usurianus Primus, several OL codices, Vulgate 6th C to 5th C AD, Syriac version evidence, British Library Add, 1447 new, PA present, 5th 9th C. Ethiopic Armenian Georgian traditions reported preservation, later early medieval. Patristic references, Jerome explicit, Augustine, Didascalia Apostolic Constitutions content 3rd to 5th C. Variant placements in manuscripts, after John 7:36, after John 21:25 in Luke, later medieval tradition. Important notes for scholarly context. 1. Earliest explicit Greek manuscript witness. The oldest surviving Greek manuscript that actually contains John 7:53 to 8:11 in the canonical location is Codex Bezae, late 4th 5th C. 2. Latin tradition evidence. The presence of the Pericope in multiple Old Latin manuscripts and Jerome's Latin Vulgate reflects widespread Western transmission early in Christian textual history. 3. Versional attestations matter. The Syriac Witness in British Library Add, 1447 do, shows that some early Eastern versions did include the Pericope, counter to the idea that it was strictly a Western phenomenon. 4. Patristic testimony. Jerome's explicit report of Greek and Latin manuscripts with the passage in his time and later citations commentary by Augustine support the reality of the story's circulation in early canonical gospel texts.